Hello there. I have some more of my story, and I apologize for not doing any before now. It's just, I don't know, I keep meaning to, and then I don't because I come up with other stuff, other videos, and I have had so many good ideas lately. Not just ones that I've come up with, but I've gotten so many good ideas from so many people, and I don't know, I get so excited about them, I just want to do them. So I'm really sorry. And so it's about 1 o'clock in the morning, but I can't sleep because my neighbors upstairs intermittently keep dropping things on the floor and stomping around, and they've had a couple of arguments tonight, and so I don't really know what's going on up there. But anyway, I can't sleep because directly over me they're being loud. So and I feel bad about not posting any of the story, and I apologize for that. So, I don't actually know how much I'm going to do. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to do. I'm going to try to stay awake, but it is really late. I've had a very busy day. But we're going to start on page 518 with chapter 107. And honestly, I don't remember where we left off, so I'm really sorry. I know the court stuff's going on. I know we were doing that. So I'm just going to start here, and we'll see what's going on with these people. Okay. I was left dumbfounded by Pastor Faust's attorney's handling of the cross-examination. After we were adjourned, I grabbed Aiden by the arm and dragged him outside. "What the heck just happened in there?" I asked him. That state's attorney went on and on for God knows how long, asking all those detailed questions. And all Pastor Faust's attorney, Mr. Will, could ask was, did anybody else actually see any of these things happen? No way is that all he had to work with. Maybe it was, Aiden said. Pastor Faust and his attorneys brushed past us on the courthouse steps, with Pastor Steele and some of the staff guys following closely behind. Sis was nowhere in sight. Neither were either one of Pastor Faust's children. Pastor Faust didn't speak to me, and I wondered if he could see Aiden. Aiden watched as Pastor Faust and his entourage elbowed through a crowd of reporters who shouted questions at them and stuck microphones in their faces. Pastor Faust didn't even stop to speak to any of the brothers and sisters who were parading around on the sidewalk to show their support for him. They all climbed in the church's limousine and drove away. "What are you thinking?" Aiden asked me. "Is this the present? Is this really happening right now?" "I don't understand your question, Liddy." "I mean, you remember when we went back to when Pastor Faust was a kid?" Aiden laughed. "That was just a few hours ago. Of course I remember." "Well, is this now or sometime in the future? Can any of these people see us?" "This is real," he said. "This is now." "Oh. What did you think about Eduardo's testimony?" I scoffed. What a load of crap that was. Pastor Faust was right. Somebody got up with that kid and told him to say all that. I just can't believe he could put his hand on the Bible, swear to tell the truth, and then lie his butt off like that. And the thing about... Come on, Aiden said. Let's go back to your apartment and get started. You've got a lot of typing to do. I didn't want to sit down and transcribe all that stuff, and I told him so once we got back to my place. He walked over to my computer and turned it on. "You'll be fine after you get started. I know it's been a really weird day for you, but I need you to get this done tonight." "What, all of it? God, Aiden, we were in there for hours. I've got at least four full tapes of that junk. You can handle it," he said. "Am I going to have to lay out of work again tomorrow?" "I guess so, since I'll be up all night tonight. A few more days like that and I can kiss my job goodbye. I'd really like to keep my job and not get kicked out of here, but if you really want me... Do you know how hard it is to find a decent paying job around here? I don't know how people manage to get by. You hardly ever see..." "You're trying to change the subject," he said. "Not everything is about you and your hardships. Before you get started on the tapes, I want you to talk about what you just heard." "I want to talk about what you just heard." "Well, former brother Eduardo's just a liar." "What makes him a liar?" Aiden said. "Isn't it obvious? He's trying to make Pastor Faust look bad, so he got in with the group of protesters. Mr. Will said it's Eduardo's word against Charles's because because no one not affiliated with the church saw these acts. Alleged acts, I said. Okay, alleged. If it's one person's word against someone else's, who are you to say which one is a liar? I laughed. Former brother Eduardo's the liar. I mean, really, that's a no-brainer. Then let's talk about your thoughts on what Lester did to Charles, the stuff we saw during lunch. I don't even want to think about that. Ugh, I still don't think it was real. I wish I could say that Charles was the only one that Lester assaulted, but he's not, Aiden said. There were others. Well, if that really happened, why does Pastor Faust still look up to him and talk about him like he was right up there with Jesus himself? It's a quirk of the human race, Aiden said. Children who grow up in really strict homes or who are physically or mentally abused often come out seeing their parents, their fathers in particular, as gods, or at the very least, their idol. Either that or they completely despise their parents. Charles believed that Lester was offering him love, acceptance, and the path to the truth in Christianity, and for that he was willing to endure anything. In Lester, he thought he'd found someone who actually cared about him. Charles never got that feeling from his own parents, so when Lester started paying attention to him, he latched on and didn't want to let go, even if it meant having to participate in sex acts with the man on a regular basis. God, that is sick, I said. Pathetic. But again, like I said, it just makes me admire him more to see that he's been able to accomplish all this with his life. Aiden grabbed my shoulders and pulled me close into his face. Liddy, Charles was abused. You saw that firsthand. A lot of children who are sexually molested go on to do it to others when they're adults. The protesters are saying Charles is a pedophile. Eduardo Flores isn't the only one who will testify to it. Several others are going to get up on that witness stand and say, under oath, that Charles had oral and anal sex with them. They'll give explicit, consistent details about what really went on behind closed doors between them and their former pastor. Use your years of higher education for once and put two and two together, for Christ's sake. I couldn't look him in the eye. There's no need to insult my intelligence, I said. But I know it's not true. My bio brother's been in the church for years, and if anybody, Liddy, consider the possibility that the person who's been lying all this time is Charles Faust. That's what you need to do now. But if he... Aiden disappeared before I could finish, and he left me alone for the rest of the night to think it over. Not sure if the microphone was on. Okay, chapter 108. Pastor Faust watched his feet as he paced back and forth across the floor in his office. He paused occasionally to wipe sweat off his forehead with a handkerchief. Carl was sitting behind Pastor Faust's desk. I don't know what you're so worked up about, he said. It'll be a cakewalk. Look, we know they have no physical evidence. Bam, you're home free. No judge has ever convicted anybody on testimony alone in a case like this. And so what if Eduardo kept his story straight? It wouldn't matter if 100 guys got up there and told some sob story about how you treated them when they were in the church. They can't touch you because they have no physical evidence. It's their word against yours, like your lawyer said, and we know who's more credible. Easy for you to say, Pastor Faust muttered. Try spending a day in my shoes, having some judge staring at you like you're the scum of the earth, and then come back and tell me I shouldn't be worried about anything. Denali brought Pastor Faust a glass of water, stopping him mid-pace near the window. Drink this. You're sweating all the fluids out of your body. Pastor Faust gulped the water down and handed the empty glass back to him. And listen to Carl. We've got it all worked out already. You'll have to listen to a lot of testimony. The attorneys will bicker back and forth, and exhibits will be submitted, but you'll walk away scot-free in the end. And just think about what a boost it will be for your congregation when you come out of this thing a free man. You can come back and talk to him about truth prevailing, God looking out for his anointed leaders, all that good stuff. The protesters will go away, and everything will return to normal before you know it. Aiden walked into the room, unseen only by Pastor Faust. He had just left Liddy in a horrible state, which he hated to do, but he needed to check on things back at the church. Denali acknowledged his presence with a wink, and Carl merely glanced back at him. What if something doesn't go the way you think it will? Pastor Faust asked Carl and Denali. You never know. Anything could go wrong. The judge seemed awfully interested in hearing what Eduardo had to say, didn't he? Are you sure we know what those people are going to say when they testify? What if the state does come up with some so-called evidence? What if they don't and the judge convicts me anyway? Yeah, you say it's never happened before, but there's a first time for everything. God, I go crazy in prison. I'd die in there. Carl got up and stood in front of Pastor Faust. Stop. Hold on. Denali and I came here to help you. We can't stop the trial, but we're doing everything we can to make sure you aren't punished unfairly. And with Aiden being gone, we're especially interested in helping you. Not that we think you can't do it on your own, but we only want to help. It's not you, Pastor Faust said. You two are about all I have. I'm just really nervous right now. All those people who came to the rally had on those yellow ribbon pins the single brothers made. They had big signs that said, "We love you, Pastor Faust." I don't want them left wondering if I really did the things I've been accused of when this is all over. Aiden sat on the edge of Pastor Faust's desk and crossed his arms. We're taking care of all that, Carl said. Trust me, nobody's going to be left with any doubt hanging around in their minds about this. It's going to be perfectly clear when it's all over to every last person in this church. We just have to plow through this and get it behind us, amen? Amen, Pastor Faust said. I guess I probably need to go home and get some sleep. The lawyers want to meet with me early tomorrow morning about Eduardo's testimony. They want to talk to Ruby, too. She's going to have to get up there and testify to some god-awful things. Lord have mercy on all of us. I hope she can handle it. She's really not comfortable talking about this stuff. I know she's not, and I'm really sorry she's being dragged into this, but it was unavoidable. We'll make it as painless as we possibly can for her, though. I promise you that. She's led a very sheltered life up until now, Pastor Faust said. I've always tried to protect her from some of the awful things that go on out there in the world. This deception by the protesters, for one. But now, I can't do anything to prevent her from having to go through this. Aiden waved to Denali, and the two went out in the hallway. How's he holding up? Aiden asked him. He didn't look too good. Has he been checking his blood sugar? He's not sleeping much these days, Denali said. He won't come out and say it, but he regrets telling you to leave. He really thinks you've just disappeared. And the blood sugar, I don't know anything about that. I haven't seen him check it in the past week, though. Not good, Aiden said. He knows better than that. Oh well, I held his hand and nagged him about it for over 20 years. It's not my problem anymore. So is he ready for the trial? He doesn't think he is. He's about as ready as he'll ever be, though. He seems to think that constantly meeting with his attorneys will help. All he's doing is using more of the church's money every time he does that. Aiden smiled. I saw the witness list for the state. Did they really get Brian Dixon to agree to do this? Oh yeah, he was eager to come. How'd the state find out about him? Aiden asked. Let's just say somebody put a word in their ear about certain things. Any other surprises I should know about? Not really, Denali said. It's going to go the way we discussed it, with no major changes. And as Carl said just a minute ago, there won't be any doubt when it's all over. Chapter 109. I had 1,000 thoughts running through my head that evening while Aiden was talking. Even after he literally got in my face and gave it to me straight, I couldn't pull myself together enough to realize what he was actually saying. Then, just as I was almost ready to open my mouth and let a bunch of jumbled up nonsense spill out, he had the nerve to disappear. I fell forward from where he had been supporting my shoulders and felt the emptiness, heard the quiet in the room. I don't know how long I sat there, my brain processing away. All that new information to deal with, and I had nobody to talk to so I could try to make sense of it. I thought about calling Drew, but I couldn't find her number anywhere. Calling Sister Andrew or anyone else in the church would have definitely been a no-no, so I dismissed that idea. I was pretty sure I was on some sort of bad parishioner list for the stunts I'd pulled over the last week, and even though Aiden had assured me I had nothing to worry about, I didn't want to press my luck. The phone was in my hand before I had the presence of mind to look at the clock to see how late it was. I dialed my grandparents' number. It rang 5 times before my half-awake grandmother picked it up and mumbled something I couldn't decipher. Grandma? Liddy? Oh, goodness. Hold on. I heard some clambering and rattling on the other end. She was taking the phone out into the hallway so she wouldn't wake Grandpa up. I listened to the noise and realized I didn't know what to say to her. If Sister Esther thought I wasn't ready to send a letter home yet, then this was definitely inappropriate. You can't plan what you're going to say as well on a phone call. "What's wrong?" she asked me. "What time is it?" I cringed. "Oh, God, Grandma." I looked at the clock. "It's almost 11:30 here, so..." "It's 12:30 here," she said. "Are you okay?" "I don't know if I am or not. I really just needed to talk to somebody." "You know you can call us any time, Liddy." I'm not sure if it was the sound of a familiar voice, confusion, or just general fatigue that put a lump in my throat just then, but it was hard to keep from crying when she said that. "I'm sorry I haven't called or written," I said, and I clenched my fist tight. "Richard was the same way when he joined that church," Grandma said. "You remember." My mind automatically went on the defensive because I knew what she was thinking, and I temporarily forgot about everything that had happened in the past week. I wondered why I'd even called her in the first place. "The Open Arms asks a lot of their parishioners," I said. "Don't read anything into the lack of letters or phone calls or whatever that isn't there. I understand why why we never heard from him." She sighed. Silence. "I guess I just needed to hear somebody talk to me," I said, not exactly sure what my point was. "Like sometimes I wonder if I still exist. Do you ever get that feeling? I need to say something to somebody and hear them answer me so I'll know I'm really here." "Liddy, just today I was talking to somebody and I was like, is this the present? I mean, where are we right now?" "Well, those are weird questions, though. I don't know of anybody who's ever been in that position. That could have been normal." "What do you mean normal?" Grandma said. "What position?" It gets really bad when I'm driving," I said. "I make a turn in a parking lot or something, and other cars stop backing out of their spaces until I get past them or get out of the way. I wonder at first if they can see the bus, but then I realize they can. I think to myself, if it weren't for this big old bus, nobody would know I was here. It's the most horrible, unreal sensation you can imagine, but God, Grandma, it's good to hear your voice. You have no idea. If I can keep on finding proof that I exist, I know I'm not stupid or crazy." "Liddy, I have no idea what you're talking about," Grandma said. "You're not making any sense. You know, like when you go for a while and it seems like all the people around you ever do is talk at you, point out stuff you did wrong. You didn't know it was wrong before you did it. If you'd known, you wouldn't have done..." I remembered that Drew had said that to me not a week earlier. I took a deep breath and exhaled in a loud, "Ha! Liddy!" "I gotta go, Grandma." I hung up the phone and laid down on the couch, and I trembled as all the stuff I'd seen ran through my head faster and faster. The old church, Pastor Faust as a boy, Pastor Hammer, the hallway, the conversation, Brother Eduardo's testimony. I had to get a hold of myself. I sat down at the computer, opened a blank Word document, and put the first hearing tape in the dictaphone. "What's the point of this?" I said. I put the headphones on and adjusted the volume. Why would anybody want to read this? I sighed. Gave up. Fine, Aiden. Wherever you are, you win. To heck with my job, stuff at the church, just whatever you want me to do, I'll be your little slave. I don't know why you want me to do this, but I'll fetch, play dead, rot in front of this computer, whatever you say. I stomped down on the foot pedal and typed as hard and as fast as I could for about 20 minutes. My hands actually hurt. Then I calmed down and got into the rhythm of it. I started listening to the answers Eduardo gave to the state's questions, and I paid attention to the tone of his voice while he talked. With every question I typed up, every response, my mind churned. All those little details, the consistency of his story. Could it be? I started to think at about 2 o'clock in the morning. I stopped myself, pushed away from the computer, and took the headphones off. I went to the refrigerator and got a bottle of water. "No way," I said as I twisted the cap off. "Pastor Faust would never. I mean, especially when you consider the fact that he knows what it's like to have somebody you trust do something like that to you. No. I finished the last tape somewhere around 5 o'clock the following morning, and I left my supervisor another voicemail about not coming into work. Then I collapsed on the couch and slept like the dead until Aiden came to wake me up at about 8. I opened my eyes to see him standing over me. He was waving a black object in my face, but my eyes were so puffy and blurry that I couldn't figure out what it was. "What is that?" I said. He went to get a glass of water. "It's a surprise for you. Sit up." I looked at the glass in horror. "What's going to happen if I drink that? You're not going to launch me into outer space or anything, right? It's just water, I promise." "Do I have to go to court again today?" "Yes, but before we go, I want you to watch this tape. It's the story that Primetime America did on Charles." "How'd you get that?" "It's not important." He put the tape in my VCR and turned the television on. I was a bit on the huffy side about having to spend another day in court when the tape started. "I was there for the entire interview," I said as Aiden sat down on the couch beside me. "Why are you making me watch it again?" "Because all you got to see was Charles's interview. Look." There were 5 other men, including Eduardo, in a disguise because he was a minor, but I recognized him. And they all told the same story about Pastor Faust approaching them for sex while they were in the open arms. All 5 said it started with questions from Pastor Faust like, "What would you do if I was to get you? What would you do if I got you in the tail?" Primetime America knew of over 20 men from all over the country who had the same story, men who didn't even know each other. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. The 5 men who talked about Pastor Faust said he was somebody they really trusted and admired and would do anything for, so when he told them that sex between 2 men wasn't a sin as long as there was no love involved, and that they needed to do it to keep them from fornicating with women. I was in this mindset, one of the men on the tape said. I saw everything through Pastor Faust's eyes, and I would always stop and try to figure out how he'd handle any given situation. What would Pastor Faust do? Normal Christians would try to think of what Jesus would do, but in that church, it's like they replaced Jesus with a mortal man, and they do a very good job of convincing the parishioners to do this. I deceived myself with my own personal saying, if Pastor Faust says it, it must be true. Aiden stopped the tape at the end of the show. I just sat there on the couch. He didn't say anything for a minute. "Why would they stay?" I finally asked. "Why would anybody stay there and go through that if what those men said really happened? Brother Brian, Brother Clayton, Brother Jake? Why? Who would hang around and put up with that? There must be something wrong with the men who agreed to be on that show. Maybe they wanted the attention." "Why would any man go on national television and say they were abused in that manner?" Aiden asked. "Can you imagine the humiliation?" "Christians don't do things like that," I said. "No way." Aiden was kneeling on the floor and he looked at me. I stared at the tape lying on the floor beside him. I couldn't look him in the eye. "Did those things happen?" "You've believed all along that there's no way they could have," he said. "Why do you ask me that now?" "I can't. Those men..." I was shaken. Aiden got up and moved closer to me. He took a deep breath. "Everything Eduardo said is true. The men on that tape told their stories and none of them lied." "So then, Brother Richard's been..." "Yes, Liddy." He embraced me. "Him too." He held me and told me over and over again how sorry he was. And I wondered why he was doing that. I mean, I knew on some level, but I didn't feel much of anything. "You've been trying to get me to see it," I said. "All this time, and you... God, what an idiot I am." He sat down on the couch beside me. "You're not an idiot, Liddy. You've been deceived by a very convincing group of people, but that doesn't make you an idiot, just like those men who were abused aren't idiots." I didn't know what to say. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I feel weird." "I guess I just expected a different reaction," he said. I got up and went to the closet. "What should I wear today?" I pulled out my navy blue dress. How's this? I think that would be fine. It's a lovely dress. I looked at it in disgust. Do you know how much I hate wearing dresses? Yes. I've never had to wear a dress every single day since I had to wear a dress every single day since I got here because of. I stopped myself. Never mind. Sorry. Aiden started to say something, but I went into the bathroom with the dress and shut the door before he had the chance. I threw the dress down on the floor and stared out the window, looked down at the alley below. I still wasn't feeling much other than pure hatred toward that defenseless article of clothing. I would have preferred having a tooth pulled to putting on that dress. I kicked it in the tiny space between the commode and the bathtub and marched back into the living room where Aiden was waiting for me. What a piece of work, I huffed. I mean, that man's amazing. No pastor does that. I glared at my closet. Because of that man, I've got a whole wardrobe of crap I wouldn't have worn in a million years if I'd never heard of this place. I know you don't like the clothes you have to wear, Aiden said, but hopefully, screw it, I said. Let's get on over there already. I slammed the closet door shut and went back in the bathroom to put my dress on. I put on some heels with no hose, picked up my purse, checked the tape recorder and my supply of blank tapes, and walked to the front door. You coming? I'm right behind you, he said. We got there early. I sat there on the bench and fumed. This is really messed up, I said to Aiden, who was sitting beside me. So all these people who are going to testify really were abused by Pastor Faust? Aiden sighed. Every one of them. Is the judge going to convict him? Well, you'll have to wait and see that for yourself. Well, don't think I'm going back to that church ever again. No way. I'll sit here and listen to these testimonies and everything because you want me to. Shoot, I'll even transcribe it all, but there's no way in earth you'll get me back into that church. You have to go back, Aiden said. And you can't let anyone know that there's anything wrong. Everything has to go on as normal. I know you're upset, but this is the way it has to be. I kicked the back of the bench in front of us. No way, Aiden. No way in hell am I going back there. It's a church full of liars and sickos. Forget it. You have to finish the story, Liddy. There are some things that you haven't seen yet, and I need you to be there to document them as they happen. Don't worry, it won't be long now. What do you mean it won't be long now? How long? A month? You'll be fine, Liddy. I started to say something else, but Pastor Steele walked in just then. He saw the two of us sitting there alone and walked over, smiling fiercely. He shook Aiden's hand and gave me a wink. I guess you two wanted to get good seats for the show, he said. You beat everybody here, looks like. Liddy, you got that tape recorder ready? Yes, sir. I wanted to strangle him. I knew he was in on it too, and all of a sudden, everybody was my enemy except for Aiden. Pastor Steele clapped his hands together to hear the echo in the room. We'll get to hear from Brian Dixon before lunch. He snickered. There's a story for you. Everybody else came in a few minutes later, and the trial began again at 9 o'clock on the dot. Eduardo's testimony was over, apparently. Pastor Faust's attorneys had nothing further to add, and the state's attorneys had nothing more to ask, and he didn't even have to take the stand. They moved on to Brian Dixon, the state's next witness. I'd never heard of him before that morning. The following is the testimony of Brian Dixon, which I took on that day. Now, again, we're going to have some testimony, and I'm going to have to be able to read it. So we have Judge Clifford Stackhouse, the defendant's attorney, plaintiff's attorney, and Brian Dixon. So I'm going to have to say before each line of dialogue who's speaking. It's awkward, but I don't know any other way to do it. Okay, so Brian Dixon is sworn in. Plaintiff's attorney. Mr. Dixon, can you please state your name for the record? Brian Dixon. Brian Scott Dixon. Plaintiff's attorney. Where do you currently live? Brian. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. Plaintiff's attorney. Are you married? Brian. Yes. Plaintiff's attorney. Do you have any children? Brian. Yes, I have 3 children. Plaintiff's attorney. Can you tell us where you're currently employed and what your profession is? Brian. I'm employed by a Dodge dealership in Asheville, North Carolina. I currently work as a loan specialist there. Plaintiff's attorney, what is your date of birth? Brian, March 17th, 1953. Plaintiff's attorney, now Mr. Dixon, I'd like to take you back to 1967 when you were 14 years of age. Could you tell Judge Stackhouse where you lived at that time? Brian, I was still living in Asheville, North Carolina. Plaintiff's attorney, and in Asheville, North Carolina, who did you live with? Brian, I lived with my mother and brother. Shortly after we moved to Asheville, my father went overseas to work for a year. Plaintiff's attorney, where did he work overseas? Brian, in London, England. Plaintiff's attorney, what did your father do for a living at that time? Brian, he worked for a shoe manufacturer. He went overseas to help set up a shoe factory. Plaintiff's attorney, approximately how long was your father in London after he left to go there? Brian, almost a full year, between 11 and 12 months. Plaintiff's attorney, now during this time when you were 14 years of age, did you or any member of your family join or belong to a church in the Asheville area? Brian, well, someone invited my mother to I guess you could say it was a non-denominational church. The church was in a big, like an old warehouse building outside of town. We started attending that church not too long after my father left to go to England. Plaintiff's attorney, after your mother started attending that church, did you attend as well? Brian, yes, I went to every service with my mother. Plaintiff's attorney, did you meet a man by the name of Charles T. Faust? Brian, yes, I did. Plaintiff's attorney, who was Charles T. Faust? Brian, he was the pastor of this non-denominational church. He set it up himself and conducted all the services. He went by C.T. Faust a lot, either that or Pastor Faust. Plaintiff's attorney, do you see Mr. Faust in the courtroom today? Brian, he's back, sitting against that glass wall in the very back. Plaintiff's attorney, can you describe an article of clothing he is wearing? Brian, he's wearing. Defendant's attorney, we'll stipulate if that will help. Judge, very well. Plaintiff's attorney, we'll accept that stipulation. Can you tell us what type of relationship you and your family had with Mr. Faust, the pastor and founder of the non-denominational church you mentioned? Brian, well, when we first started going to this church, this was a fairly small church. I don't know if it was under or slightly over 50 people that attended that church. We got to know Mr. Faust. My mother liked him and thought he had a good personality, and he conducted his church well, and we decided to start going there on a regular basis. Plaintiff's attorney, did you have occasion to talk with Mr. Faust at the church? Brian, yes, we did. I did, and my mother and brother did. Plaintiff's attorney, and did you ever have occasion to spend time with Mr. Faust outside of the church as well? Brian, yes. Plaintiff's attorney, could you describe for Judge Stackhouse how that relationship grew between yourself and your family and C.T. Faust? Brian, well, my brother and I liked Mr. Faust a lot because he spent time with us and would take us to different functions in the area. We got to know him after a while as a real close friend. Plaintiff's attorney, can you describe what types of functions he would take you to? Brian, we went out to eat with him pretty often. We'd go to hospitals to visit the sick when we had people that we knew who were in the hospital. We'd go visit the sick and read the Bible to them or sing to them or just sit and talk with them. We would go out to carnivals. We went swimming together. We did a lot of activities together. He almost took us in like a parent, with my father being gone. Plaintiff's attorney, now as this relationship progressed between yourself and the defendant, tell us what happened. Brian, okay. Going back a little bit, starting after getting to know Mr. Faust and going to these various functions with him, we became real close friends, my brother and I did, with Mr. Faust. And there was a couple other boys in the church, Glenn and Dan Alston, that my brother and I went to school with and ran around with and did a lot of things with. We say on certain days let's say we went to the carnival. We would leave the carnival and we would go to Mr. Faust's house. We would go out to eat and then we would go to Mr. Faust's. Sometimes we spent the night, my brother and I, and sometimes Glenn and Dan, would spend the night at Mr. Faust's house. He had a little 2-bedroom house near the church and he lived alone. He would always put a pallet on the living room floor. Plaintiff's attorney, what's a pallet? Brian, blankets, pillows. It's where you sleep if you don't have a bed. And we just do different things. If you want me to go into the story a little bit, if I could just relate, plaintiff's attorney. Well, if you can, tell us how this relationship developed with them. Brian, okay. Actually, during the time I'm speaking of now, we would go to his house. It was a very open, we looked up to him as a role model, almost like a father, like I said. He was a lot of fun to be around. Like I say, we would go swimming, do lots of things together. But at his house, in retrospect, he would always, when we would go to his house, we'd make the pallet on the floor. Mr. Faust would always walk around the room with his pants unbuttoned and his zipper undone. He told us he felt more comfortable with his pants like that because he was a little overweight. Not as overweight as he is now, but still overweight. And we never thought anything of it at the time. Over a number of months, our friendship just grew. He was a very special friend. Plaintiff's attorney, tell us what happened next. Brian, on December the 24th, I'll be okay in a minute. Plaintiff's attorney, do you need a break? Brian, no, I'll be all right. December 24th, 1967. Judge, if you need a break at any time, let me know. Brian, thank you. The friendship which we had, my brother and I developed with Mr. Faust, came to a sudden end. We went to Mr. Faust asked me to go to a Catholic high mass with him. I had never been to a Catholic church that I can remember up to that time. Plaintiff's attorney, tell us what happened. Brian, I went to the mass with him, and we got out of the church quite late. It was snowing when we got out. There was an inch or two of snow on the ground. In my house, there were a lot of hills to go up and down to get to it. I knew it would be real tough to get to my place, to get back home. Mr. Faust didn't have a car, and we could walk to his house from the Catholic church. Mr. Faust said, well, Brian, just stay at my house. See, we ended up at his house. I called my mother, told her that I was staying at Mr. Faust's house because the road was slick and I couldn't walk home. Plaintiff's attorney, now, when you went to the Faust home after the Catholic Mass, did you go there alone with him, or were there any other friends or family with you? Brian, always in the past there had been my brother or other friends with us, but this time, on this occasion, I went there alone. I was the only one Mr. Faust invited to the Catholic Mass. Plaintiff's attorney, now approximately what time did that Mass get out? Brian, I believe it was about midnight. Plaintiff's attorney, and approximately how long did it take to get to C.T. Faust's house? Brian, maybe 20 minutes walking. Plaintiff's attorney, and it was at that time when you got to his house that you called your mother? Brian, yes. Plaintiff's attorney, tell us what happened next. Brian, we got to the house and had a snack or something to drink, and then we got ready for bed. He had a bedroom that was unoccupied because, as I said, it was a 2-bedroom house and he lived there alone. He slept in one room and the other room was empty. The empty bedroom had 2 twin beds in it, one against each wall, and we went to the empty bedroom and undressed. And at that time, Mr. Faust asked me to massage his back, which wasn't surprising to me because when myself and my brother and others had been there in the past, we at various times massaged his back. He liked his back to be massaged with alcohol. I really didn't think it was one of the most pleasant things I had ever done, but it was okay. I liked him, and I didn't mind doing it after all he'd done for me. So this night, when he asked me to massage his back, he produced a bottle of alcohol, and I began to massage his back. Plaintiff's attorney, now what room were you in at this point? You said you were in the empty bedroom, not the one Faust normally slept in? Brian, yeah, there was a hallway, and down that hallway, the 2 bedrooms were right across the hall from each other. The empty bedroom was on the left as you went down the hall. Plaintiff's attorney, was there anyone else in the bedroom besides yourself and the defendant? Brian, no, we were the only 2 people in the house. Plaintiff's attorney, when he asked you to massage his back, was he on the floor, the bed? Where exactly was he? Brian, Mr. Faust was on the bed, lying on his stomach. He was on the twin bed facing the outer wall of the house, and he was in his briefs, and I was in mine. My bed was about 6 feet across on the other wall, the wall closest to the hallway. Plaintiff's attorney, so as he was there on the bed, he had only his briefs on? Brian, yes. Plaintiff's attorney, where did this alcohol come from that he asked you to massage his back with? Brian, I don't know. It must have been in the room. He just had it there and asked me to massage his back. Plaintiff's attorney, tell us what happened. Brian, so I began to massage his back, and this time he began to say, lower, lower. At first it was no big deal, so I would pour alcohol and go lower on his back. Plaintiff's attorney, could you describe how he said lower, lower? Brian, Mr. Faust was laying on his stomach, and until I got about a few inches above the small of his back, to me everything was fine. Then he began to say lower in a different voice, and now I can recognize it as a husky, maybe sexual voice. He'd say lower, lower, rub my back lower. Plaintiff's attorney, in a lower tone that you were using right now? Brian, yes, real soft. And I got into the small of his back and in his brief line massaging his back. And then he pulled his briefs down over his buttocks. And in his words, he asked me, and by this time when he pulled his briefs down, I was holding the alcohol and he pulled his briefs down and he says, pour it into my crack and rub it in. And I said, no. And at that time he said, oh, I'm sorry. He said, don't worry about it. He flipped over onto his back. I believe he had the sheet up around his waist. He asked me to massage his chest. Well, I thought I wouldn't like to rub his buttocks, so the chest would be better. Although I was scared at the time, wondering what this guy really wanted. He'd been my friend. Defendant's attorney, Judge, I'm going to object to the speech and ask that we go back to the question and answer. Judge, sustained. Plaintiff's attorney, what happened next? Brian, he turned onto his back. I massaged his chest for a very short time, maybe 1 or 2 minutes. He placed his hand on my inner thigh and I jumped up. I said, I'm going to bed. And I went over and switched off the light and started toward my bed. And he said, I'm sorry. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Come back over here. It's okay, Brian. Come over here. It's okay. And after pleading like that for a while, I walked over to his bed. And he continued to apologize and talk to me. And I'd been there maybe 15 seconds. He again put his hand on my inner thigh and cupped my genitals with his hands. I jumped back and I said, no, I'm going to bed. I went to the bed on the other side of the room. I laid down. And for the next few minutes, he begged and pleaded with me to come over and sleep with him and keep him warm. It's cold out, he said. Come over and keep me warm. Come on over and sleep with me. Come get in the bed with me and keep me warm. Plaintiff's attorney, and those were the words he was using? Brian, yes. And he asked me several times. Plaintiff's attorney, and any time during the course of this contact with him in that room, did he ever touch your genitals? Brian, he touched my genitals through my briefs. Plaintiff's attorney, describe what happened. Brian, about touching my genitals? Plaintiff's attorney, yes, sir. Brian, he had his hand on my thigh. Then I walked back over to the bed after turning off the light, and he had his hand on my inner thigh. While he was apologizing to me, he ran his hand up my inner thigh and cut my genitals with one of his hands. And at that point, I jumped back. Plaintiff's attorney, what happened next? Brian, I went over to my bed and laid down. And that's when he was pleading with me to come over and sleep with him and keep him warm, making statements that it's cold, keep each other warm. And I said, no. Plaintiff's attorney, after that, what happened next? Brian, I was scared. I just said a prayer to God, protect me and let me sleep, keep him away from me. And he didn't force himself on me. I went to sleep, woke up the next morning and went home. Plaintiff's attorney, now when you got home, did you tell anybody about what had happened? Brian, yes, I told my older brother Mark about what had taken place. Mark thought I should wait and see. He wasn't sure. He said, I don't know what's going on either. If he's trying to do something, he'll do something else. Let's not tell anybody. Let's not get everybody all stirred up right now. We didn't have any experience with this kind of thing. Plaintiff's attorney, now at this point you were 14 years old? Brian, yes. Plaintiff's attorney, how old was your brother Mark? Brian, at that point he would have been 15 and a half. Plaintiff's attorney. Now, after that conversation with your brother Mark, tell us what happened. Brian. Well, sometime after that, my dad was still overseas. My mother was going, I can't remember where she was going. My brother and I were to stay by ourselves, and my brother had asked Mr. Faust to stay at our house with us for the night, which he did. Plaintiff's attorney. How long after this December 24th incident did this happen? Brian. I would say it was at least 2 weeks. Plaintiff's attorney. What happened? Brian. Mr. Faust came over to the house, and again, as usual, we talked, had some snacks, watched TV, and he sat on the couch with his pants unbuckled and unzipped. And when we got ready to go to bed, we turned off the TV and went back out of the den into our bedrooms. Mr. Faust was supposed to sleep in my parents' room. They had a queen-size bed in one of the bedrooms. My room had 2 twin-size beds, one for my brother and one for me. My brother and I went to our bedroom. Mr. Faust went to my parents' bedroom, and again he began to call softly to me from my parents' bedroom through the hall to my bedroom, asking me to come and sleep with him and keep him warm. He asked several times. I became more upset each time, frightened or whatever. I told him no every time. He quit asking after several minutes, and then he showed up at our bedroom door after a few more minutes, dressed. He said he was going somewhere. I don't remember where he said he was going, but then he took off for the rest of the night, just left us alone there. Plaintiff's attorney. On that occasion, there was no contact? Brian. No contact. Plaintiff's attorney. Between Faust and yourself, there was no physical contact. Is that correct? Brian. That's correct. Plaintiff's attorney. Now, after that second incident, you did have occasion to speak to your mother about what happened, correct? Brian. My brother and I talked again after this occasion. My brother said that sometime, I believe, between the December incident and this incident, that Faust had asked my brother about masturbation and sex. Defendant's attorney. Judge, I'm going to object to that. Judge. Sustained. Plaintiff's attorney. Did you have a conversation with your mother at some point? Brian. Yes. Plaintiff's attorney. And this conversation with her was after you and your brother had spoken? Brian. Yes. Plaintiff's attorney. What was said? Brian. We relayed the events that I just talked about, the December occasion and the occasion at the house. We told my mother that Mr. Faust was making advances toward me of a sexual nature. And my mother proceeded to talk to a couple of our friends and ask them questions. After talking with them and getting the same kind of answers from them, defendant's attorney. Objection, Your Honor. Judge. Sustained. Plaintiff's attorney. Tell us what happened after you had your conversation with your mother. Brian. My mother went to Mr. Faust's home and told him to stay away from my brother and me, or she was going to call the police. And very shortly after that, he was gone. Plaintiff's attorney. What do you mean he was gone? Brian. He had left Asheville. He shut his church down and moved out of his house and left. Plaintiff's attorney. Since that time, you have not belonged to any church that C.T. Faust is associated with. Is that correct? Brian. Not to my knowledge. None that he was, not the physical building, no. Plaintiff's attorney. Have you at any point attempted to sue or extract money out of C.T. Faust or any church that he is associated with? Brian. No. Plaintiff's attorney. At any point, have you conspired to try to take members of his congregation at any church to try to bring them into a church of your own? Brian. No. Plaintiff's attorney. Have you ever started or been a pastor of any church of your own? Brian. I was assistant pastor for a year or two at another church in Asheville. Plaintiff's attorney. And at that point, when you were assistant pastor, did you ever attempt to bring any members of the Open Arms Christian Church into your church? Brian. I hadn't even heard of the Open Arms Christian Church at that time. No. Not the one here in Indiana. I think he called his church in Asheville something like God's Church or something like that. Plaintiff's attorney. You stated that on one occasion when the defendant was asking you to massage him that he was wearing briefs. Is that correct? Brian. Yes. Plaintiff's attorney. What color were his briefs? Brian. White jockey type. Plaintiff's attorney. Not boxers, but in fact tight to the skin. Is that correct? Brian. Yes. Plaintiff's attorney. Did the defendant ever have a conversation with you about homosexuality? Brian. On one occasion, when we were driving through the country in his mother's car, He did ask me if I'd ever had a homosexual experience. Plaintiff's attorney, could you tell us to the best of your knowledge what his words were? Brian, have you ever had I believe the word he used was homosexual. Have you ever had a homosexual experience with another man? I said no. Plaintiff's attorney, did he carry that conversation on further with you at that point? Brian, no, he switched to another topic. He was right in and out of it. Plaintiff's attorney, did he bring that topic up at the beginning of the conversation, or was it just inserted? Brian, it was inserted with other topics. Plaintiff's attorney, nothing further, Your Honor. And then we have cross-examination. Defendant's attorney, Mr. Dixon, how did you happen to get your story to the authorities? Brian, how did I happen to get my story to the authorities? I was contacted, I believe it was about 3 months ago, by the Dalton Fisher Gazette, or a reporter from that newspaper. This reporter asked me questions about whether or not I had had an experience with C.T. Faust, and I replied that I had. I don't know how they got the information. Defendant's attorney, did you ever talk to any reporters from the Dalton Fisher Gazette in person? Brian, no, I didn't. Defendant's attorney, did anyone ever see Reverend Faust do these things that you claimed he did? Brian, of course not. We were always alone. Defendant's attorney, why didn't you tell someone after that first alleged incident, the one with the alcohol back rub? Seems to me like you would have. Brian, because, like I said, I thought Mr. Faust was my friend. I wanted to make sure this was something I really needed to tell anybody about before I said anything. I really liked him, and I didn't want him to get in trouble for no reason. I've been very clear on that point, I believe. Defendant's attorney, were you aware back at that time that Reverend Faust there were articles in the Dalton Fisher Gazette about alleged homosexual activity in the Open Arms Christian Church, the church Reverend Faust started and still leads? Brian, no, I live in North Carolina and wouldn't have any reason to know things like that. Defendant's attorney, were you ever contacted by someone on television regarding the matters that you testified to here this afternoon? Brian, I was contacted about a month ago by someone from Primetime America. Defendant's attorney, and that show hasn't been aired yet, but it's concerning Reverend Faust, is that right? Brian, that's right. Defendant's attorney, and you knew when your interview was being videotaped that there was a chance of this being aired on national TV, did you not? Brian, yes. Defendant's attorney, well, your testimony this afternoon is much like it was on that TV program, isn't it? Brian, I would think so. Defendant's attorney, and you even broke down on that tape too, didn't you? Plaintiff's attorney, objection. Judge, sustained. You don't have to answer the question, sir. Defendant's attorney, have you given any other statements of any kind that you have reviewed in preparation for your testimony here today? Brian, yes, I have. I reviewed statements that I have written. Defendant's attorney, have you made any tapes of any kind, either audio or videotapes, of what occurred between you and Reverend Faust? Brian, no. Defendant's attorney, has anybody else done that in your presence, asked you questions and then recorded your responses in some manner? Brian, no. Defendant's attorney, all right. Now, on your Primetime America interview, there were other alleged victims of abuse by Reverend Faust, weren't there? Were other people interviewed about Reverend Faust? Brian, I only saw the part I did. I heard there were other victims of C.T. Faust, though. Defendant's attorney, Mr. Dixon, do you know any of those people you supposedly heard about? Brian, no, I've never met them. Defendant's attorney, but you heard they had some bad things to say about Reverend Faust, correct? Brian, yes. Defendant's attorney, no further questions, Your Honor. Plaintiff's attorney, nothing further. Judge, thank you, Mr. Dixon. You may step down. This is Chapter 110. I can't remember exactly how many days passed between seeing Brian Dixon's testimony and going back to court. Aiden told me after Mr. Dixon left the witness stand that he'd let me know when I had to come back to court, and then he just vanished. I had to go home by myself, and I didn't see Aiden again for quite a while. 2 weeks, maybe. But yes, I kept on going to church and all those Bible studies and rallies and protests in front of the courthouse, just like Aiden wanted me to. I wore the mandatory yellow ribbon pin everywhere I went. I took notes and brought my tape recorder along to church functions whenever I thought about it. All anybody ever talked about was how well things were going in court. I wondered how they could even pretend to know a thing like that when none of them had been allowed in the courtroom even once. I wanted so bad to stand up and say, "Oh yeah? You ought to go sit through some of these testimonies if you think things are going so fabulous. It'd make you sick. And those two attorneys y'all are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees to, the ones that are supposed to be on Pastor Faust's side, they're not doing diddly squat to defend him. It doesn't really matter anyway, because guess what? He's guilty of every single thing the state's accused him of, and life in prison's too good for him. Things aren't going that great, and it's high time y'all woke up." The parishioners only believed things were going well in court because Pastor Faust kept saying they were. And as the brothers and sisters were fond of reminding each other, if Pastor Faust says it, it must be true. I even heard one brother go up to Pastor Faust after Pastor Steele finished preaching one Wednesday evening and say, "I haven't read any of the articles in the newspaper about you, Pastor Faust, but I know they're not true." The inherent lack of logic in statements like that still amazes me. I kept my mouth shut, though. Aiden said I couldn't tell anybody, even my grandparents, what I had learned. I didn't have to attend all of the testimonies, but the ones I did get to hear were pretty much the same. Aiden always left me a note under the front door of my apartment when he expected me in court the next day, but I never saw him, not even in court. He finally turned up again late one night after I got home from a spur-of-the-moment Silver Star rally at the church. God, those things were terrible. Pure propaganda. I wondered if the IRS knew about Pastor Steele using the church for his business meetings. The term filthy lucre came to mind whenever I thought about this wonderful new venture Pastor Steele had gotten the whole church involved in. Anyway, I'd been thinking about Brian Dixon all through that rally. I'm not sure why. He had been Pastor Faust's first victim as far as I knew, and that was back in 1967. 30 years, I thought. That's longer than I've been alive. Aiden was waiting for me at my apartment after I dropped Sisters Andra and Veronica off at their place. I didn't beat around the bush when I saw him. "So this isn't a new thing for Pastor Faust," I said. Him having sex with men in the church." I shuddered. Men and boys. We were sitting in the kitchen, and Aiden was leafing through some of the transcripts he'd gotten out of the safe. "No, I'm afraid not," he said without looking up. "Doesn't that bother you? Doesn't it make you sick?" No response. "Does it make you mad? Does it make you feel anything?" Nothing. I squirmed and fidgeted on the stool and yanked my skirt around. "Would you mind if I change clothes?" "Not at all." He kept reading. I went to the closet and jumped to reach a large plastic bag on the top shelf. That bag contained the few remaining artifacts of my former, so-called worldly existence. I pulled out a pair of shorts and a tank top. Aiden finally looked up when I came out of the bathroom. "That looks much more comfortable," he said. I felt naked. It was the most skin I'd exposed in a while. "I have some questions for you," I said, "now that you've finally decided to grace me with your presence again." "It's awfully late, Liddy." "I know, but there are some things that have been bothering me, things that don't add up. I'm hoping you can help me make some sense out of them." He put the transcripts down. "I'll only answer what I can." "If you knew Pastor Faust was doing that for so long, how come you didn't do anything to stop it? You're supposed to be helping him, and if he's got some sort of weird perversion—" "How do you know I didn't do anything about it?" Aiden said. I rolled my eyes. "It's been going on for 3 decades, Aiden. Come on." "I can't go into detail with you about that now." I punched the wall with my fist. "Good God, Aiden. Look at everything I've done. I've gone around and been your little slave reporter practically since I got here. I've had to learn about all the crap that really goes on around this place. Well, that place. And I still have to go to church and smile and act all happy like everything's fine. What more could there possibly be for me to do?" "Next question, please." "You can't expect me to just—" "Liddy, calm down." "Jesus. I need a cigarette." He reached into his trouser pocket, produced a pack of Marlboro Light 100s and a lighter, and he held them out to me. I stared at them, my heart leaping. "You know I can't take that," I said. He took the plastic off the pack and removed the foil. "It'll help settle your nerves." Don't do this to me. I never would have said that if I'd known you'd wave a pack in my face. That's just cruel. Who said you shouldn't smoke? Pastor Faust said no true Christians use tobacco of any sort. Yet he himself smokes cigars in his office. Are you serious? No way. He even has a humidor up there. Oh, shoot. Give me one. I walked over to where he was sitting and took the lighter and one of the cigarettes out of the pack. Go easy, Aiden said. Remember, you haven't had one in a while. I felt so naughty, standing there in the kitchen with my shorts and tank top on, lighting that ungodly cigarette. The first few drags made me cough, and I got an unbelievable nicotine buzz, but I did calm down. Aiden watched me while I smoked with this funny grin on his face. What are you thinking? I asked him. I'm thinking that I'm very glad I know you, and that I've enjoyed your company over these past few months. I'm sorry you've been through such a rough time, but I'm glad you're the one I chose. Why me, though? I needed somebody with a more objective outlook on this situation, he said. I also wanted somebody who was dependable, observant, and who would be willing to sit down and write the story when it was all over. And your brother's sort of a computer guru. That'll be important later. Why would that matter? You'll see. Now I have a question for you. This may help answer some of the things you've been wondering about. What makes the Open Arms Christian Church so much better than every other church out there, in your opinion? Well, they preach the truth, I said. I don't want you to tell me what you think I want to hear or what's been drilled into your head for the last 2 years. Give it some thought. What is it about this church that's so special to you? What's so great about it that you moved all the way from North Carolina to Indiana to be a part of it? Like I said, they preach the truth. Take your time and really think about it. I stood there for a minute, flicking my cigarette ashes into the sink. I guess the truth thing really was important to me. I felt like I could get something at the Open Arms that no other church offers. They baptize in Jesus' name. I've never been to another church that did that. What else? I feel like I really matter here. You get a chance to do things, make a difference in the world, and not just spend your life being a bench warmer. What have you gotten to do? Aiden said. Tell Pastor Faust's story, even though it's not turning out the way I thought it would. What about the average parishioner? What does your brother get to do, for instance? Richard? I don't know. I never talked to him. But the single brothers get to minister to people at the Navy Training Center. That's something. And they get to minister when they travel if they're in the military. Richard does a lot of the church's computer stuff, I think. What about the women in the church? Aiden asked me. Oh, they have Bible studies, sometimes cook for events at the church that aren't catered, things like that. Sounds like your typical churchy duties to me. What else makes this place so unique? We're protected from the worldly influences that can lure us away from our Christian walk. That's a big one to most people in the church. We only associate with each other so we aren't tempted to go back to our old life. He set the cigarettes and lighter down next to the dictaphone, then waved his right hand in the air. A book appeared, resting on his palm, and he held it up for me to see. This is for you. I walked back over to where he was and took the book out of his hand, and I read the title aloud. Captive Hearts, Captive Minds. I've heard of this. Renita, the former church member, told you about it. She gave me a list of book titles when I first met her. This was one of them. Makes me think about a person in a cage. What's the rest of the title? I looked at the cover again. Freedom and Recovery from Cults and Abusive Relationships. Turn to Appendix A on page 276. Look at the list that starts in the middle of that page. I flipped over to the page. Okay. Read the list aloud. Let's see. This is a list of... what? Characteristics of cults. Read it, Liddy. So I read the list aloud. The group is focused on a living leader to whom members seem to display excessively zealous, unquestioning commitment. The group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. The group is preoccupied with making money. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. Mind-numbing techniques such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, Debilitating work routines are used to suppress doubts about the group and its leader. The leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel. For example, members must get permission from leaders to date, change jobs, get married. Leaders may prescribe what types of clothes to wear, where to live, how to discipline children, and so forth. The group is elitist, claiming a special, exalted status for itself, its leaders, and members. For example, the leader is considered the Messiah or an avatar. The group and/or leader has a special mission to save humanity. The group has a polarized us versus them mentality, which causes conflict with the wider society. The group's leader is not accountable to any authorities, as are, for example, military commanders and ministers, priests, monks, and rabbis of mainstream denominations. The group teaches or implies that its supposedly exalted ends justify means that members would have considered unethical before joining the group. For example, collecting money for bogus charities. The leadership induces feelings of guilt in members in order to control them. Members' subservience to the group causes them to cut ties with family, friends, and personal group goals and activities that were of interest before joining the group. Members are expected to devote inordinate amounts of time to the group. Members are encouraged or required to live and/or socialize only with other group members. And this list comes from Captive Hearts, Captive Minds, Freedom and Recovery from Cults and Abusive Relationships. That's from the first edition, pages 276 to 277. It's a really good book if you are involved in an abusive church or an abusive relationship. It's got some really good stuff in it. Aiden watched me as I read, and the list sent a shiver down my spine. I still felt nothing but anger, but now there was a stirring in my brain, a warning that there was more to come. And I'm going to have to stop there because it's really late, and that's the last page I have handy. I have to walk all the way over there to get more, and I'm lazy. So I will try to get some more done really soon. Cross my heart, hope to die. I really will. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you again.